Welcome back to Command & Conquer Tiberium Crisis, and welcome to the co-op mission. So we are done with the main campaigns here, the single-player content. The game here does have classic skirmish and multiplayer, but it also has a couple of co-op missions. Well, a literal couple, it's 2 co-op missions, but there's more than that. So it does also have a challenge mode, and the challenge mode are basically, at least for the most part, campaign maps that we then can play with 2 or more players. But these 2 maps here, there's one GDI map, that's the one we're playing right now, called Exit, as well as the Not map. Those are new maps that are specifically designed for the co-op mode, only for that. This one here is pretty straightforward. We have 2 GDI bases here in the middle of the map, or rather, maybe one big base split between 2 players. I'm playing with Sayed Mamdoh here, who has been working on the English translation of the second iteration of Tiberium Crisis. So special thanks to him. And here our job is to protect armadillo convoys that GDI is going to send through the area. They will be attacked by Squint forces. The Squint don't have a base, they don't build any, they just follow the convoys or phase in from various positions. And you will also be attacked by Tiberium life forms that come primarily across those bridges you can see there. The mission is pretty straightforward, not a bad concept because you can split your strategy a little bit. I like that about co-op maps the most. Of course, it's generally fun to play with another human player, but if you have different roles or can take different roles, that's kind of neat, such as one player defending the base and one player protecting the convoys. Even though you don't have to play it like that, but you could if you wanted to. Also hammerheads, we're going to build a lot of those. They're a little bit inconvenient to load because you have to load them manually on the ground, but I guess that's an engine limitation. I don't think you can have a mechanic where the hammerhead, which is permanently floating, is just in the air, then you tell a unit to enter and then it just lands and then takes off again. I don't think that's really possible. So you basically have the allied Nighthawk mechanic where you have to land manually and then you can put infantry inside. Yeah, this map here has a couple of issues. It's not the performance is particularly great, partially because of the rain, which you cannot turn off. I'm not sure why, because you can turn it off for other maps, like just generic multiplayer maps, and also for other challenge maps, but not here, and it would really help because the map is somewhat crash prone. Not just this map here specifically, in general the game is not particularly stable, or rather the mod, the game is actually fairly stable, and there's only so much you can do about that, because the problem with co-op is also that if you have 2 players and you need to rely on both of them not having their game crash, that makes it like disproportionately likely that you're not going to be able to actually finish the match at all. So, but yeah, we'll see how far we get here. One reason to use these hammerheads here is that the hammerhead, the zone trooper combination is actually pretty potent. It's fairly expensive, like both the units together cost, I think, possibly more than a mammoth. And they're also a little bit fiddly because you need to build them separately and then you need to load them in. Even though you could make the case that since you build them separately, building them is actually a little bit faster because you rely on 2 queues there. But yeah, they can bust around the map, that's pretty good. They're good against almost everything. They're mainly anti-armor, but even against infantry and structures, they're not actually that bad. So they're fairly versatile, even though there's no real enemy structures on this map here, so that doesn't really play much of a role. But yeah, those are good to have to buzz around, even though the buzzing is going to be a little bit limited here because this map performance is also not great. And once the convoys show up and the sprint show up, the frames are gonna drop. Most definitely. But yeah, we still have about 2 minutes left here until those arrive, so you can take that time to prepare. And since you get a full base with everything, you don't need to do like excessive preparations here.
Hammerhead online. Ground support. Rotors engaged.
And yeah, you also have these spikes here. The spikes are actually pre-captured, so you don't need to worry about rushing for those. And interestingly, I had another experience with this map here. So we tried this before and it didn't really work. So it said dropped out, or I dropped out, or rather the game was disconnected. So and then all the other GDI structures just turned neutral, which was an interesting experience. So you can continue playing like that. You can actually play this map here with an AI This map here is probably not the one that would be most suitable for an AI, because you have very specific targets, even though I guess the AI would still go just after enemy troops. But in other maps where you just build a base and stuff, that would probably be a bit easier to do. But oh well, we'll see how this here goes.
Sonic's powered up. Got it. Personnel carrier. Right away.
Another interesting thing here is that, so Sayed mentioned that the reason why the Tiberian Sun cliffs here look so weirdly kind of a little bit blurry, or like an incorrectly resized JPEG, is because there's actually a bit of a difference in the size that like the standard assets have between Red Alert 2, which this game is based on, and Tiberian Sun, which is actually the basis for most of the assets, the general landscape assets at least. There's also custom assets, even though a lot of these assets here are also done by other modders, so they're not done specifically for this mod here. And there's also other ones mixed in from, of course, Tiberian Sun, Tiberian Twilight, Tiberian Wars, Kane's Wrath. So there's quite a lot, and that also leads to a bit of a clash of art styles and also to kind of odd sizes. Like if you compare the GDI barracks with GDI power plants, that looks a bit strange. The power plants look a bit too small. Whereas like power plant and arsenal, that looks a bit more reasonable, or power plant and airfield. But yeah, I think the reason is if the barracks was any smaller, it would look really tiny. But if the power plants were larger, like 2 or 3 structures, then they would also have the issue that they would take a lot of space, and since it's a very basic structure, that, yeah, there we go, here's the first Armadillo transport, and there's also there was a Tesla coil warning sound. There's also a Viceroid, it's like the tripod walker Viceroid from Tiberian Twilight. That's actually a suicide unit. I'm not sure how evolutionarily a unit would evolve into a suicide unit, but I'm not an expert on the evolution of Tiberium creatures here. Yeah, so this transport here, keeping it safe is not going to be too much of an issue, but there's going to be more of a threat later. You can also play these maps on various difficulties, or rather, there's difficulty variants. I don't think you can actually adjust difficulty for multiplayer maps, even if it's multiplayer maps that do have, say, AI factions on them, which is something that is influenced by like difficulty scripts or difficulty levels and scripts associated with those. But yeah, so there's simply various variants for that.
Got the guns. Gunship deployed.
So you got lots of Tiberian creatures as well as some Skrin. The Skrin basic infantry can actually be somewhat dangerous for other infantry, especially for GDI commandos. I learned that in that one mission where I had an elite commando, but it lost to like 5 or 6 basic non-promoted Skrin infantry, which was a bit sad. I know, and you can see the game speed's dropping considerably. I know that part's the reason why you have the commandos to blow up structures. That's what it's really good at, because it just does it in one shot, and if you don't defend yourself properly against enemy commandos in that way, that can be incredibly frustrating. So here's some more units, but the cavalry is on the way, but you also need to defend your base. In the first waves here, actually not that much, also because you have these base defenses set up for you already, so it's not like you're defenseless. Juggernauts here are on the move as well. And the thing with Armadillo is also, Armadillo is pretty slow, but at the same time also has a good amount of health. It's elite, so it does regenerate. And yep, wormholes, it's too fast. So you don't really have to worry that much about the transport being destroyed immediately. So it's not super fragile. And in fact, it's one of the toughest units actually, as far as I know. And dramatic music's kicking in. These corruptors here, I think those are corruptors. They're kind of annoying. It's actually a pretty decent range, but they can't target air units, so they're extremely weak to that hammerhead combo. You can also use, of course, firehawks or orcas, but you have to recharge, whereas the hammerhead always floats around, which is somewhat like moderately unusual in Command & Conquer, where they don't really have. Other games do it all the time. Like StarCraft, most air units, in fact I think that all air units, they just float and that's it. But in Tiberian Dawn you have the Apache, Chinook and the Orca, and they just have to land. In fact, you can also not force them to just stay in the air. Well, you can kind of by have them repeatedly fly over obstacles where they can land, or have them fire on the ground, but then when they're out of ammunition, they will still land. So you'd have to actively, occupy that lighthouse. So you have to actively do that. There's more scrim coming. Whereas in Red Alert 2, you've got or rather in Yuri's Revenge, you've got the siege chopper. But the siege chopper also has to fire to stay in the air, like the Nighthawk from base Red Alert 2. And in Tiberian Sun, you don't have any such units. And then in generals, you do actually get units that are permanently in the air. And that's like the helicopters, like the Helix and the Chinook. So they just float. The planes still have to land, which does make sense. But at least it's in the sense of a video game. But yeah, the helicopters are actually permanently floating, which changes them a little bit. And you do have that in Tiberium Wars as well. Lara Kane's Rush with a hammerhead. And Red Alert 3 as well with most air units actually. The planes still have to land to recharge, and you have some planes like the Vindicators who... Oh, there's some Mechapede here. Who have to... Yeah, it's not much of an issue. Even the guys in the transport there can actually take care of that. There we go. Yeah, but here that's somewhat unusual. It can be very useful because a lot of these units are also great against infantry, like the Hammerhead is. So if you only have a couple of rocket guys, that might actually not be enough. But if you have any like serious anti-air, like GDIs are not like static anti-air defenses, then they're mostly toast. So they're not that heavy. You need a lot of them. But then again, if you have a high quantity of units just to overwhelm the enemy, then you're not really having a good counter or anything. You just have quantitatively more units. So the green screen are here. I think they're actually the same faction as the mutants, like gameplay wise. Nobody coming from here. So they have the Mechapedes. Mechapedes don't quite work like the ones from the original. I don't think they can, because like the segment mechanic, I'm not sure you can squeeze that out of Ares. Maybe you can. Feel free to let me know, but I don't think you can. Gun walkers as well, but none of this is particularly dangerous, especially with the repair platform here. This is not that much of an issue. And they're gone already. I guess you could also blow up the bridges. I'm not sure whether they will fix those. You can get the AI to do that.
A unit is under attack.
Yeah, escort is on attack. It's not that big of a deal. But you want some guys to defend them there. Yeah, your rocket harvesters, they do have rockets, which can actually be bad, because they might actually provoke the AI, which is not ideal. You generally don't want that. You probably want your harvesters to just harvest and maybe have like a weapon to defend themselves against like strangling infantry. That's like the most they can actually handle. I should have evacuated that harvester, but oh well. It's fine. We still have those spikes. Even the Tiberium spikes don't give you that much money. It's like 10 credits per click, which is not terrible, but also not great. Oh well. Quite a lot of units at the base here. We probably don't need that many here, but you never know. You also don't want to lose any of your structures, because you don't actually have a construction yard. So if you lose any of your production structures or so, they're gone permanently. You can only use your support powers and whatnot. Lots of snipers here as well. I'm not sure how good the snipers are in this mod. I didn't really use them much because they're fairly expensive, and as with so many modifications, not just modifications, there's a lot of RTS games in general, it seems to be that a good option is to simply have like a large amount of really bulky units that are difficult to destroy, and you don't even need the most firepower, because the survivability is simply going to be better than that of any other units, and the AI generally doesn't counter that well. A human player would be different if you had just Mammoth. They'd probably just build rocket guys, and that would be a cost-effective counter, but the AI, maybe some of the more advanced skirmish AIs, but at least on maps like this, the AI is not going to do that. Yep, and the next aircraft is going to come soon. This map is also kind of slow actually, but not just. Maybe you can see it's just sped up considerably after that convoy is gone. But yeah, still it's fairly slow pace. But then again, it also gives you plenty of time to prepare. Yeah, let's fix some of those hammerheads. Mammoth hang out here. Also, I have a feeling we're investing more into protecting these vehicles than whatever the vehicles are transporting as well. But who knows? Maybe it's, I don't know, liquid Tiberium or something else incredibly exciting. In any case, yeah, that's basically like the basic concept of this mission here. Yeah, if the stability of this mod was better, that'd be great, especially for those co-op maps here. But unfortunately, it is not. And the creators don't seem to be terribly concerned with stability, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah, let's get the hammerheads here ready. And let's see. Yeah, actually, we could get them into position, but we still have quite some time left to prepare. And we only have so much in the way of resources, really. And because this map here is fairly slim on Tiberium, which a lot of these maps are in this mod here, so they don't have that much Tiberium. And a lot of the stuff you build is fairly expensive with all the upgrades and the structures. Also because you have a lot of like different tiers. You generally have your like comm center or radar, and then you have your infantry structure, and then you have the actual tech center. So it takes quite a while to fully tech up here. Yeah, so there's a bunch of adcords. It's going to take a while, but that's fine. There we go. Just hang out here. Get some more hammerheads here. But you do have the spikes, you do have some steady income, so if you need a little bit of money just for repairs and whatnot, that should be fine. The hammerheads probably don't make the stress on the game a little bit probably not easier because they have like 2 rotor blades and everything. That's probably somewhat taxing. But I think it's really the rain, which you cannot turn off for this map here, which is a bit of an oddity, but oh well. Yeah, the engineer thing is a bit unfortunate, that you can not take anything over that's not a neutral structure, because I don't think it would break the missions in any way, and you can also fairly easily expand because you can almost always build MCVs or the emissary or surveyor, so it's not like expansion is very difficult otherwise, as is the case with some of the earlier CNC games where you can almost never build MCVs. So unless you take over structures, expanding means you have to build like a chain of buildings, and it's really much of a privilege to be able to expand. But here it's not really the case. Yep, build those hammerheads here, and let's see. Still a bit of time left until the next convoy here shows up. Just checking out my infantry. And there we go. Yeah, there we go. That's the resized terrain here, which is a bit unfortunate, but I think that has been fixed in the sequel. Or at least addressed in one form or another. I mean, they could have done this in Tiberian Sun, but it doesn't have the area support, so there's a lot of logic that doesn't exist in Tiberian Sun. I think mind control logic is not included in that. Yeah, escort those vehicles. I was just still harvesting, but yeah, it's not that much Tiberium left. It's mostly just the Tiberium sludge here, but you can't harvest that. Nevertheless, let's get some vehicles here. Well, let's see. More action going on in the time to rock and roll indeed, in the northeast there. And there we go. Moskvin phasing in. But half these, like the gunwalkers, actually I think they can attack air units. A lot of units can in this mod here. Zone troopers as well, that's very much a Tiberian Twilight thing, where most units can target all other units. Not all of them, but it's not uncommon. Also because otherwise the balance would be out of whack. But well, you can debate Tiberian Twilight balance, if you're being honest here. So that's the next transport. It's gonna be fine. Makes you wonder how it ever reached this region here in the first place, but oh well. It's a game. There's actually more Tiberium left there than I thought, but yeah. Fine with me. I guess there's also a whole bunch of of those blossom trees. If that makes a difference as well. And here we have the, I think they're called the iron bags. Yeah, the iron, I was about to call them the hunchbacks, but I think it's called the iron bag. It's like Tiberian Twilight mutant melee unit. They're fairly powerful, but it's a melee unit, so there's a decent chance it gets blown up before it actually does anything. And there we go, the game crashed, of course. That's a bit unfortunate, but what can you do? Oh well. See you next time.